Well, hi, hello, and how are you, honey snickerdoodle? Today, we are going to get into this. Relaxers cause cancer in Black women. Is this true or false? By the end of this video, you're going to know how to use the scientific method to give something validity or to debunk it once and for all. If you want to know how to be a science nerd, to get up, then keep watching.
Trust that exactly where you are is where you're meant to be. So keep your chin up so your crown doesn't fall. Remember, you're royalty.
Before we get started, make sure you go ahead and subscribe here to my channel so that way you are notified every single time I post another video. We have to first look at the source and break everything down. We cannot just pick out bits and pieces of information without actually assessing it. The scientific method is broken down into a couple of easy steps. Step number 1 is the question and the observation. Number 2, the research, because you have a question, something you want to know, so you do your research. Number 3 is the hypothesis, an educated guess based on the research. Number 4 is going to be you testing that hypothesis with experiments. All right. Next up is going to be you analyzing the data that you have now acquired from testing all of your hypotheses with so many different experiments. And you then analyze that data. And after analyzing the data from all of these different groups, including a controlled group, all right, then you report the conclusion. So let's go ahead and break down the scientific method and plug it in to see how the person who wrote the article that everybody is making law now. Let's see how these scientists came up with this article. So here on the screen, you will see the exact article here. You can read it for yourself right now. I'm just giving you a short, sweet little breakdown of the article. Now, this is the National Institute for Environmental Health. All right. So they were not studying relaxers or Black women specifically. What they are actually studying is breast cancer itself and the different causes. So the question came later. The question is something that the majority of consumers have, or the majority of Black women have, but this was not the question initially that these scientists went in looking for. They were researching different causes of breast cancer specifically, and they did not center in on Black women. Data from the sister study, all right, and the link is in the description box below. The sister study was not for Black women, it was for women, period, women in general around breast cancer. So this was data for about 33,000 and some change women in America, and these women and these ages range between the ages of 35 and about 71. All right, so it was a very small group of women over an 11-year period. Women in the United States of America specifically. All right, this is where they were collecting the data from for 11 years. The study was to identify the risk factors that could go into causing breast cancer initially, because so many women were getting breast cancer in every race. They wanted to know, like, is there a way that we can stop this? Is there a way that we can prevent this? So they had over 33,000 women that they were using in this study. Not to mention, these women were not all like locked in the same room, living together under the same conditions. This was not a controlled group where they knew what they were eating every day, where they knew their hair practices or anything. It was not a controlled group. These were just about 30,000 women of all races and nationalities that were in this group, and they did sort of kind of reportings via email or by phone, or they would come in and get certain tests ran a couple of times out of the year over an 11-year period. Now, after following this group of women for about 11 years, they found that there were about 378 cases of uterine cancer cancer found, and 60% of those cases were from women who self-identified as Black women. All right. So whenever an article says that somebody self-identifies as a Black woman, that means that these women were like writing stuff down. They were not, this is not from them doing like specific genetic testing on each woman. No, this was from them looking at a paper that these women have filed and said, check off, I'm a Black woman. That's what it is, a self-identifying Black woman. So now we're gonna move on to the hypothesis. Now that you know where and how they collected the data and how long they were looking at this data. So from the data that they collected, and this is all from the article, this is not me pulling stuff out my butt. From their data, the hypothesis, which is the educated guess, it was not fact, all right? And you have to pay attention to words like may or think or should, stuff like that, stuff that's not like wedged in stone, all right? They think, they ain't know. Dr. Shay Jung Chang, PhD. I am so freaking sorry. I know I said that wrong. I am so sorry. But this is their hypothesis, okay? Oh, and basically, in a nutshell, they're saying that the hypothesis is, and this is where Black women are included in this, because I want you to pay attention to the beginning of the article. At the very beginning of the article, they tell you that there are so many different forms of chemical services, relaxers, lighteners, perms, and so many different forms of chemical services. But see, this is the thing. The difference between all of the other, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but pay attention to the beginning part of that article where it tells you that. Pay attention to that part. So basically, the hypothesis, he's or she is like, okay, the adverse effects may be. So it's not wedged in stone. Pay attention to that word. This is a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess. They are guessing based on the information that has been presented to them. This is not factual. Okay. So they're saying the hypothesis at this point is that most likely the reason that over 60% of these cases of uterine cancer is simply because Black women are using relaxers more frequently. They get relaxers way more, and they start at a younger age. Most Black women are getting relaxers for the first time when they're like 10 or 11 versus somebody who gets their hair lightened and bleached. They're not bleaching or lightening their hair today, at least in high school, some people, or getting a perm, an actual perm, because there's a difference between a perm and a relaxer. Other races were not getting perms or lightening their hair and letting their kids do it at 10 or 11 years old. So their hypothesis is, it's like, okay, it has to be the fact that Black women are doing it on a regular basis, and they're doing it more often, and they're starting at a younger age. It didn't have anything to do with the chemical formulations and relaxers versus perms versus Brazilian blowout. It didn't have anything to do with the chemical compound. All their hypothesis is that the reason that Black women are getting uterine cancer more than other people are is because they're using it more often than everybody else, and they're starting doing it on their children at a younger age. That is their hypothesis and nothing else. They gave no thought whatsoever to the actual brand of relaxer because they had no idea what that brand was, which leads us to test with experiments. There were no experiments ran. So this part of the scientific method was completely skipped over altogether because there were no experiments ran. They had a set group of about 30,000 women and some change. I'll put the exact number right here. And out of those women, they just followed them and they would check in, but there were no controlled groups. When we go to the data, when we go to analyze the data and you look within the article, they let you know that they knew nothing about the brands of relaxers that they were using. They didn't know anything about the chemical compounds or anything. They didn't understand like how they they were using it. They didn't know how they were being applied, which is another problem, because when we are looking, when we're talking about it now on social media or any news broadcast that you see about relaxers causing cancer, they're showing Black women getting relaxers in professional hair salons. And let's be honest, women who go to a professional stylist every 2 weeks. I did hair for 15 years. My clients didn't let nobody touch their hair but me. So Black women who actually, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but we have to be realistic. Like, my clients would have never been a part of a test study. I didn't have one client that told me they were a part of any type of test study whatsoever. All right. So let's keep up with that. They did not have the type of information and documentation to even pinpoint a certain brand of relaxer, a certain level of frequency that they were doing. They just asked them questions like, oh, how much are you relaxing your hair? And they're telling them a date that is a lot more frequent and an age that is a lot younger than the other people that they were testing. But it was not, oh, just focusing on Black women. No, that's not what this was. Next up. Now, I want to go to them analyzing the data. Now, I'm going to read this word for word verbatim, right, from the article. And I'll put the article right here. I'm reading from my board because it's just how my brain processes information. I have to write it out and then read it back to myself in my own handwriting. I know, special. So this is them analyzing the data from them doing the observation, the research, the hypothesis, and not testing at all with experiments, which they say in the article. And now they're analyzing the data. So it says, to our knowledge, this is the first study that examines the relationship between straightener use and uterine cancer, said White. More research is needed to confirm these findings in different populations to determine if hair products contribute to identify the specific chemicals that may cause cancer in women. That is what she said. Word for word verbatim. I am not making it up. So they never said in this article for sure that cancer is caused in Black women by relaxers. They never said that professional cosmetologists specifically, no matter what they do, if they're doing it right the way they were trained in cosmetology school, causes uterine cancer. They never said that. They never said that. This article doesn't say that. And the problem is, I'm sorry, I'm getting, and now they reported the conclusion. Based on that, they reported the conclusion, and the conclusion is chemical straighteners may, not definitively they do, they may cause or contribute to the accumulation of cancer cells in the uterus. But it did not say specifically that relaxers cause uterine cancer, nor did it say that professional cosmetologists that are doing it cause cancer. But what it did say is they don't know how they were putting the relaxer on. They don't know what chemicals, what relaxers they were using. They don't know any of that. All they know is this. And they said in the article that they need to run way more tests on actual controlled groups and different populations. So if they saying that they need to do it on different populations, that means that they study on a select group of women, and they study on a select generation of women. And generation to generation, our practices do not stay the same. Every year levels up something better. And that's what we're supposed to do. I know my daughter better be better than I was. They better be better than us. So let's get into some of the missing data. What are some of the missing pieces? What are some of the missing pieces? What is this article missing? Because this is not This is not enough information for anybody to make a YouTube video on. This is not enough information for anybody to draw any type of conclusion on if whether or not cancer is caused in any way, shape, or form by relaxers specifically, especially because these doctors that ran these studies, they say that they don't even know what brand of relaxers cause cancer. They're saying in their article that all of the women, over the 60% of those 370 something people that did develop uterine cancer, all they know is that they are self-identified as black women. That's all they know about them. They don't know what type of relaxers they use. All they know is that they identify as black women, they relax their hair, and the frequency in which they do it. That is all they know. They don't know anything else. So the missing data is, for one, them having a controlled group that they can do different studies. Controlled group and a controlled group means they're controlling what they eating on a regular basis. They're controlling what type of products they're using. They have one group that's using this type of relaxer, one group that's using this type of relaxer, one group that's doing box relaxers at home. But see, because they don't even know what relaxers caused it, they can't tell you if whether or not these are women who were going to professional hair salons that ended up getting uterine cancer from relaxers, or if these were women who were doing the just for me perms since they was a little girl, or if these were the women who use box relaxers, because box relaxers are a lot different than professional relaxers. A box relaxer is made for every porosity. It's going to be the highest level, because it's going to be for every density, every porosity level, because they know every type of woman with every type of density, texture, porosity is going to come and get it. Versus a professional hair relaxer is picked out by a cosmetologist based on porosity and density. All right. For example, in a professional salon, if you come to me for a relaxer, I'm not giving you, if I look at your hair and your hair looks really, really, really curly and kinky, I'm not automatically picking the super relaxer because your hair is super curly. No. Because on the surface level, yeah, you think that that's what you're supposed to do if you've never been to school for hair. But if you've been to school for hair, you know you don't pick relaxers based on density. You pick it, based on the look of the curl pattern. You pick it based on their porosity and their density. So if I do your porosity test real quick and I see that you have high porosity hair, even if your hair big, I'm not giving you a super relaxer because your cuticle is already open. And if I put a super relaxer on your hair, it'll feel good for a minute, but long term we'll have issues. Hair weathering will set in. So I'm going to use a medium relaxer on somebody who has high porosity hair, medium to low. And then the same thing when it comes to somebody who has normal porosity hair, is going to be more so based on the density of their hair and their porosity. So I'll be using anywhere between medium and low relaxer for their hair. And somebody with low porosity hair has a cuticle that's super tight and super shut. They're going to be the ones that I'm using the super girl, like the super to medium relaxer. And of course, this is going to it'll be altered a little bit depending on the density of each client, right? So yeah, that is something that I want people to understand. Like it was incomplete. Moving along. Dates, times, and application processes. Most people put relaxers on wrong. Most people think that you have to work relaxer into the scalp. Most people think that you have to work color and stuff like that into the scalp, but you don't, because when you put products on the hair shaft, those products swell. So there's no need to put relaxer on the scalp. There's no need to work a relaxer in like this, because the second it touches the scalp, it's going to automatically swell up there. And if the scalp is based properly, none of the chemicals that damage the scalp can penetrate the hair shaft. All right. So yeah, And that's going to be a whole nother class for Guru 101, so I can't go deep into that right now. So that leads me to the process of application. They don't know how they put it on. They don't know if whether or not they were basing it properly. Cancer is also caused by poor diets, and most of the time certain populations, depending on the top population of people that they were testing, don't really have the best diets. And cancer, uterine cancers also can be caused based on the stuff that you're putting in your body. And then that goes to any health issues that may exist. They didn't have any information about that, any previous health issues that they had, or the previous history of their family with uterine cancer. They didn't have any of that information. And then lastly, as stated by the person who wrote the article in the first place, they needed a more controlled and diverse group, a larger population to run this conclusion and this hypothesis on, to really draw this conclusion. So technically in this article, they never really drew a conclusion. She said, hey, he said, hey, we need to do a little bit more research. We don't have enough research to give you a definite answer. But this is my intention for this video, wasn't to be like,
oh, people stupid. They stupid if I think of relaxers cause cancer. Y'all dumb.
That's not my intention. I want you guys to know the scientific method. I want you to understand what is really happening around you, so you're not constantly manipulated. That's why I make these videos, because I want y'all to remember the conversation that we had in our last little chat like this, where I told y'all that that's the narrative that they're going to paint. Anytime the black dollar is moved to another place and everybody starts focusing on something else, of course these people who started the Team Natural community in the first place are going to try to keep the money as close to home as they can, right? And see, to me, the problem isn't them. The problem is us, because if we didn't feel this way about each other, if it wasn't so easy to turn us against each other, then it wouldn't be a tactic that they're constantly using. But all it takes is for one person to tell you about an article, and everybody is turning their back on every black woman who's ever done anything, every cosmetologist that's ever done anything. And it's so sad, because you don't see that happening in any other community. This study clearly says that the same chemicals that are in relaxers are in the chemicals that everybody else uses, that every other race uses for hair. For hair lightening, for, to change their curl pattern. Like when we do a relaxer, a black woman does a relaxer to remove protein from her hair, because the more protein you have in your hair, the curlier your hair is, and it's more manageable for a black woman in her everyday life, with her raising her kids, with her working a full-time job, or with her just, laying, taking naps. It's hard. Okay, so sometimes black women like, hey, this will be easier for me to get a relaxer. Most black women aren't even getting relaxers for vanity metrics. They not just getting a relaxer because they want to feel cuter. Most black women get relaxers because it's easier for them to fit into their everyday life. Most black women don't relax their hair 100% to take their curls out. The majority of my clients would have me relax their hair just a little bit, like just to make it easier, more manageable. And I'm not being disrespectful, but if we look on the flip side, for perms and hair color, lightener, and all of that stuff, none of those are done for convenience. None of them are done for convenience. Color in the hair, vanity metrics. Even if your hair is 100% gray, you are not coloring your hair black or any color because it's better for your health. You're doing it for a vanity metrics, whether you have to for work or whatever. It's for vanity metrics. When women of other races get perms, they do it because their hair is straight and it's for vanity metrics. They want more volume. Their hair looks too flat. They want it more full. So they get extra artificial protein added to the hair to give them an artificial curl pattern. But we don't hear anything about that. You know why? Of course, there are women of other races that do perms at home themselves, but for the most part, white women not doing that. Or women who get in perms, not just white women who get in perms, not really doing that. For the most part, they go into the shop, and if they do it at home, they get the same type of chemical burns that a relaxer gets, if not worse. Okay, so that is why I really want everybody to just learn the science of hair and stop being so eager to jump on negative things. It's like, oh, it's something bad about us, let's talk about it. It's like, no, because relaxers are not bad for your hair. Not using relaxers are bad for you, just like onions are really good for you to eat internally. But if you take onion juice and drop them in your eyes every day, your vision is gonna get kind of blurry. Does that mean that onions are bad, or does that mean that the way that you've been applying it is wrong? So that's something that I feel like we all need to look at, because when you look at this article is not pointing fingers at black hairstylists. This article is not pointing fingers at the actual chemical compounds in relaxers. What this study is pointing fingers at is the frequency and the level of application, the frequency of application that black women are doing when it comes to relaxers. It doesn't say anything in this article about the chemicals in relaxers causing cancer. The only thing that this article shows is that the pattern that black women follow when it comes to any type of chemical services are leading to certain forms of cancer. And that does not mean that anybody who uses a relaxer is going to get cancer. That's just simply not true. It's not. I'm sorry. And I know there are a lot of women who are like, oh, I don't use a relaxer and it's good for me. Like, that's so good for you. That's so good for you. That's so nice. You know that you don't use relaxers. That's so freaking amazing that the thing that you chose to make your life easier is to wear your hair in its natural state. Like, that's so awesome, and I'm so happy for you. But guess what? There are other women who, whether they have a busy life or not, they just prefer their hair to have less protein. So a woman is going to go and take the protein out of her hair. Okay, just like some people like having less fat in their belly, so they gonna go get some lipo to take some of the chunks away. Like, y'all, it's not that deep. But once again, I feel like this is a situation where black women need to look in the mirror and figure out why we are constantly the subject of conversation. Why is it that out of this entire study, and even in the study, they saying this same chemical for all of these chemicals that all of us use on our hair could cause it, but none of them are, except for relaxers. And we're seeing that black women do relaxers more frequently than everybody else. That don't mean the relaxers cause cancer. Hey my love, Cyn Doll here, coming at you with another video. And in this video, I want to have a conversation. Relaxers, they're causing cancer in black women. Well, that could be true, or it could be really false. And in this video, we're going to use the scientific method to get to the answer. By the end of this video, you will know how to use the scientific method to debunk everything that you see online, or to give the things that you're seeing online validity. So let's hop right into this. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead and subscribe here to my channel. So, I forgot to pick up the microphone. Guru 101, you're going to see all of this. Yes, you will. But oh well. That's how this cookie just crumbled. Let me check the sound and make sure everything's okay. Yeah.
Trust that exactly where you are is where you're meant to be. So keep your chin up so your crown doesn't fall. Remember, you're royalty.